Hello and welcome to MUS135 Week 2. I'm going to be doing two things in this video. The first is to give you an overview of the week's activities, the way I normally do when we meet in person for lecture. The second is I'm going to be talking about practice technique 4 and demonstrating it, and also talking about intervals and the way this class approaches intervals. For those of you who are continuing, you will have heard this before, but I think it bears repeating. For those of you who are new to the class, I think this may be helpful information, may elucidate the way that we deal with intervals, as it may be different than the way you've dealt with them in the past. But before I go into the schedule, I wanted to say something, and that is I just wanted to thank you guys for watching these videos. It's incredibly helpful for the GEs and myself for you guys to get this information. So just wanted to thank you for that. It's incredibly helpful. So just the overview for the week, Chapter 19 lecture should be below this. I think it's like 18 or 19 minutes long. There's 3 parts. There's a kind of an overview. There's generating the scales at the board, and then there's talking about how to practice the Chapter 19 exercises, both for your daily practice as well as in preparation for your singing test. Your dictation assignment is just totally normal. There's 8 examples from Chapter 19. Your dictation quiz, there's going to be 2 examples from Chapter 19 of Karpinski, the same format, 4 listenings, 90 seconds in between. For intervals, there's a little bit different here, and that is you're going to be given may and te as possible scale degrees to choose from in constructing your intervals. That's because we were dealing with minor this week. Notice lay isn't there. It's because in the Karpinski textbook we haven't had la or lay or fa. So we're only going to be dealing with scale degrees that we've hit in the Karpinski textbook. For the singing test, you have the Chapter 19 exercises from Karpinski. I've notated them out 1 through 4. Those are the ones that are required. For extra credit, if you'd like, you can sing the examples, the exercises rather, 5 through 8 for up to 5% extra credit. If you are concerned about your singing test grades, that's a great opportunity to bolster your grades. And then you also have 4 examples from the Karpinski anthology. And I think that's pretty straight ahead. All the stuff's on Canvas. Okay, now talking about intervals, I talked about it just a little bit in relation to the quiz, but let me just repeat the way we're going to handle intervals. You're only going to be generating intervals from scale degrees that we've studied in the Karpinski text. So for example, we started off just with the tonic triad, and then when we had skips to re and t in the Karpinski text, those started showing up as possible scale degrees from which to draw your intervals from. And we're going to be doing the same thing as we move throughout the year. The idea is that the way we approach intervals is going to be integrated with the rest of the content of the class. So there's not going to be a time when you're given like, phi or d or some strange scale degree that we haven't studied. So as we move into skips to within the subdominant triad, those will be added as part of the scale degree palette, if you will. So I think that makes, hopefully that's clear. So let's go ahead and talk about practice technique 4 now, which is entitled Introduction to Harmonic Listening. And I'm going to give you just a little bit of background of what this is about. Later on in the year, when we get into harmonic dictation, for some people, being able to hear 3 pitches at once was just basically what's happening in harmonic dictation, because we're identifying triads which have 3 pitches. Sometimes that represents quite a leap. And so my goal in having this practice technique 4 as it relates to intervals is for you to hear 2 pitches simultaneously before you have to hear 3. So it's going to be an outgrowth of practice technique 1, which was these really rudimentary auralization skills, and it's going to serve as a bridge for when we get to harmonic dictation and harmonic identification. Now note that the way we've done intervals thus far have been both melodically and harmonically, meaning that you'll hear 2 pitches next to one another as a melody, and then you'll also hear 2 pitches stacked on top of one another as harmony. So you actually haven't had to be 100% accountable for hearing the harmony or hearing 2 pitches at once and identifying them. But starting at this point moving forward, you're going to start being asked for that. So I think that's enough background. Let's just get to it here. So number 2, introduction to harmonic listening. Number 1, direction number 1. Play 2 scale degrees at the keyboard, both melodically and harmonically. Play sing RLI's tonic triad to give harmonic context. If you're at the point where you can just kind of, hear it in your head first, that's great. But here is your triad. And I'm going to play 2 scale degrees. Direction number 2, similar to practice technique 1, listen very deeply to each individual pitch, alternating your aural attention from one to another in repeated listenings. So what I'm going to do is, while I'm playing this, I'm going to try to keep the home key in my mind's ear. But while I'm playing this, in my mind's ear, I'm kind of toggling back and forth between hearing this. So in my mind's ear, I'm hearing mi, so. As I'm droning it, I'm listening specifically, mi, and then it's like I'm shining a flashlight on this other pitch. So, mi, so, mi. Pay attention to the timbre, articulation, pitch, and volume of each pitch, taking an aural snapshot of what you're hearing. Associate each scale degree with your scale degree reference in your mind's ear. Sing the solfege syllable for each. So if you wanted to hear your scale degree references, you could, for mi, you could hear mi, mi, fa, so, fa, mi, re. For so, la, so, do, ti. Whatever those are. Of course, that was Ode to Joy and Happy Birthday for the mi and so reference melodies, respectively. If desired, use quantitative strategies, which would be things like mi, re, do. Okay, there we go. I walk down to do. So, fa, mi, re, do. Whatever it is that works in terms of just confirming that you're hearing the right scale degrees. Okay, so once you can clearly hear each individual pitch in your mind's ear, focus your listening to the sound that both pitches create while ringing simultaneously. So this is a little bit more like holistic listening, kind of take a step back, don't think too much about it, and just hear the quality. And you'll hear that like the waves, there's sort of these beatings that happen when the 2 pitches are ringing simultaneously, and just try to passively really listen closely for that. If you're unable to hear both pitches at once, repeat step 2, focusing on the sound of one pitch while trying to become very subtly aware of the other pitch. Imagine you have a balance knob in your head and you can listen to 90% of one pitch and 10% and vice versa. So this is where, rather than just going from one pitch to another, you're going to just sort of very passively just let yourself hear both pitches at the same time. Changing the balance until you hear the 2 voices equally. Try to listen holistically, passively, and curiously, shutting off any inner dialogue you may be encountering. If you can't hear both pitches right away, don't sweat it. Do your best to repeat these steps tomorrow or the next day, the next practice session, while returning to practice technique 1 to strengthen your fundamental auralization ability. And I say that because it's important. You'll hear me sometimes say, like, to listen like a child, and that is to withhold judgment. Sometimes I'll have a student who gets really, really frustrated that they're not able to hear these things right away, and they'll start just beating the crap out of themselves. It's just not a really good way to approach this, because then your attention is clouded toward all these negative thoughts rather than just listening. Okay, so I'll give you the tonic again since I've been talking so much. Okay, so now this part is important. When you can hear both pitches in your inner ear, sing the 2 pitches alternating between lower to upper and upper to lower pitch. So we just did that before. So mi, so, mi. Now as you sing, imagine the pitches are just hanging in the air around you, like a rich reverb at the cathedral or a racquetball court. So while you're singing this, mi, as you stop singing it, imagine it's still ringing when you start singing so. So in my mind's ear, I can still hear me, even though I'm singing so. And I'm kind of becoming familiar. It's like I'm teaching myself to hear them both at the same time, because one pitch I'm droning in my inner ear, and the other one I'm singing. So I'm becoming aware of hearing both of them at the same time. The racquetball court thing also works for some people. In your ear, play back the sound of one pitch while you're singing the other, so the overall effect resembles hearing both pitches simultaneously. That was number 4. Number 5, spend as much time as it takes to have a clear oral picture of the 2 pitches and then repeat steps 1 and 2 using 2 different pitches. Practice the pitches that are relevant to class, but feel free to explore scale degrees which you may not be accountable for yet. So when you get to number 5 and you pick different scale degrees, this is a really good kind of litmus test for yourself for how well you're hearing these. Because if it takes you like another 10 minutes to set up hearing both of them at the same time, you're going to know that you probably need to get a little better at it so that you can hear them more immediately. And then the final step is repeat steps 1 to 5, but without use of the keyboard, doing all the work orally. So then you're going to imagine the pitch collection, you're going to hear the scale degrees, and you're going to do the same thing, trying to move from melodically to harmonically in your mind's ear. This seems incredibly simple, but it works. And I recommend anybody, like if you sit down and you can't just hear 2 pitches at the same time, just work on this. Work on it every day. It'll help you a lot when we get to harmonic dictation, because we're going to start actually by hearing 2 pitches simultaneously when we get to 2 voices, and then we're going to be doing harmonic dictation where we're dealing with triads. So I think this will be really helpful for you. Thanks for checking it out, and watch the Chapter 19 lecture.